See, India is very famous across the globe as a diversified country. That diversity is also visible in Indian temples. For example, if you go down south, you have Dravidian style of temples. If you travel central India and the north, you have Nagara style of temples. Then towards the west of India, you have Solanki style of temples. And then in Maharashtra and Karnataka region, you have one unique variety of temples called Visara style of temples. So every region, they have their own particular style of temple construction that our ancestors have developed. We always see things in terms of evolution. We feel that something should be precursor to the existing thing. This concept comes from the Western philosophy and Western ideology, wherein there should be always one precursor, and from there this evolves. So this is a linear evolution kind of theory that we talk about, but it necessarily be not that way, because when it comes to Indian temples, especially when you look at Vedic period, in Vedic period you definitely do not find a temple. So, but that doesn't mean that there was no worship of gods.
Hello everyone, welcome to an all new episode of the Indic Underground. This is a show where we meet interesting personalities from the Indic cultural sphere, and one such person is the guest of today's show, Ramakrishna Kongalla. He is a tourism professor, an avid traveler, a great photographer, and most of all, an expert on Indian temple architecture. Welcome to the show, Ramakrishna.
Namaste, Indic Explorer.
Namaste. So, I want to start, before delving deeper into the subjects that we are going to cover today, I want to start by asking you, where does your passion for travel and tourism come from? Like, where did it all start?
Maybe that comes from my family background, because I come from a family which is into arts and culture, basically cultural aspects. My father is a folk dance teacher, and then we are very spiritual family. We have been traveling to temples. So whenever I used to visit temples, I used to have a lot of passion to understand what temples are actually. So visit new villages, new cultural aspects like festivals, fairs, etc. And there were new, like there will be some subject kind of, there will be some area wherein we can pursue what we love. And after my bachelor's, one day I came across a notification about MBA tourism. So it was Pondicherry Central University. I thought this is what I was looking for, and these many days nobody could give me an idea how I'll get into that. Without any thought, I applied. I got in there. I completed my MBA tourism. During this MBA tourism, so I have figured out very clearly whatever I was doing right from my childhood, traveling here and there, traveling to different places, spiritual places, pilgrimage, exploring rural, tribal heritage locations, etc. So now I got a clear idea what I was supposed to do. So the year 2009 is when I got into Pondicherry Central University, and from there I started the journey, and it's been 12 years, 13 years down the line. And from then I have traveled a lot. Post my job, I have joined my job in the year 2012. And after I have become an assistant professor in the institute, maybe because of nature of my job, maybe because I wanted to travel. Recently, just 10 days back, I have covered a 550 kilometers road drive covering more than 10 temples in a single day. So that is how it's going on.
Interesting. So, let's get into the subject and the crux of today's discussion, Indian temples. So, just throw some light in terms of the basics of the materials that are used, like how these things come together in terms of what kind of stones are used and what is so specific and unique about these structures which is not there anywhere else.
Yes. See, India is very famous across the globe as a diversified country. So, diversity is the strength of India. That is how people say, and we see it. And that diversity is also visible in Indian temples. For example, there are different styles of temple architecture belonging to different regions of the country. For example, if you go down south, you have Dravidian style of temples. If you travel central India and the north, you have Nagara style of temples. Then if you go towards the west of India, like Rajasthan, Gujarat region, you have Solanki style of temples. And then in Maharashtra and Karnataka region, you have one unique variety of temples called Visara style of temples. So every region, they have their own particular style of temple construction that our ancestors have developed. But then again, at the end of the day, what influences this Indian culture or what brings out this diversity is obviously geography. And that is the great answer that we have. For example, see, let us say the Himalayan region, like Himachal, Jammu and Kashmir, etc. There, the stone that is used for temple construction is not so quality. It's not so good, and it cannot bring out a very good sculpture in it. And moreover, it is also earthquake-prone region, and that is the reason the people in these hills, what do? Is they use a combination of wood and stone, a layer of stone and then a layer of wood. So layer of stone and wood will not make structure so stiff. So whenever there is an earthquake, the energy is released and it do not get demolished. That is a very good way of building anti-earthquake temples. And moreover, using of wood in the temple is replacement for a stone for making the sculpture. So they make sculpture on wood. So when you go to North Indian, especially the Himalayan temples, you find most of the deities are made in wood because they cannot make a very good form of murti on the stone because stone is not of that good quality. That is one thing. And go towards the Bengal again, no proper stone is available, and that is the reason they use clay, terracotta. So Vishnupur temples are terracotta temples. So basically, we know Bengal is very famous for their terracotta work. Even Assam also, you have a lot of brick temples and the terracotta temples. And then coming to the Central India is full of sandstones, and that is the reason all the temples in the Central India and part of North India are built in sandstone. And go towards Rajasthan and Gujarat, you have a lot of marble, white marble, and that is the reason most of the Jain temples in this region are built with white marble. And coming down south, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, etc., you have granite stone, a strong stone. So they use granite. Go to Kerala and Karnataka, then you have another unique style wherein the bases of the temples are built in granite, but then the superstructure is built in wood. Why? Because the Western Ghats, there is a lot of wood available, and using wood do not give that weight to the structure. So the longevity of the structure is also good. So that is how the geography, the availability of the material has influenced the style and way of the temples are constructed in this region.
Interesting. I also read somewhere about this male stone and female stone, and how it is how differently it was operated on. Can you throw some light on that? It's very unique and interesting. And also, I've heard that some edible items are also used sometimes in some temples. Like, what exactly is that?
Basically, the concept, like where we use this male stone, female stone, the names goes like this: Strishila, Pumshila, and Napunsakashila. Pumshila is a male stone, Strishila is a female stone, and Napunsaka is a eunuch. So, what do they mean actually? And why are they named so? Because and basically, where are these stones used? These stones are mostly used in making the deities of the temple, so not in construction, because construction really needs a very good stone that is tested and tried. Why? Because it's a huge structure, and if any fault goes, the structure may fall, and they use for murtis. So how do they test this stone and decide whether it is a strishila or pumshila or napunsakashila? Based on the sound of the stone. For example, you must have seen in our homes, it is a common practice, we go to the wall and we knock it to test if the wall is a very strong wall or it is a very low quality wall. So if it makes a tuk tuk sound, then we feel that the wall is of not good quality or the building is of not good quality. The same way, when you knock with maybe hammer at the stone, if it makes a sound of a bell, so if it is making sound of a bell, then it is called as pumshila. And if the same stone, if it is making a sound of maybe like iron, then it is called as trishila. And if a stone is making sound of a pot, like tuk tuk sound, so it is Napunsak Shila. So basically, the male Shila or the Pum Shila is used for making male deities. Because in the temple, the male deity is considered most important, and their consort, the Devis, are made in Stri Shila. And then the lowest quality, the third grade, wherein the associated deities are made. So, because the male deity is made from that stone, it is called as Pumshila, and the female deities are made, it is called as a Strishila. But such examples you find very rare. Why? Because when a Murti is made, so the female deity also comes in the same stone. In this three, the best is the Pumshila. So always Pumshila is used for making a Murti. That is considered as the good quality. And rest of the two, and the last, basically Napunsaka Shila is almost discarded every time.
So, from the construction of the structures, I want to move into the evolution, the historical chronology of Indian temples, starting from early Harappa, Vedic, post-Vedic, Mauryan period, all the way to the medieval and modern period. So, can you take us through the chronology as to how temple building evolved over a period of
Yeah.
time?
So a temple building, when we talk about the temples, we have a long tradition of at least 2000 years, more than that actually. Basically, we generally do a small mistake and nobody is to be blamed actually. But then what is that mistake is we always see things in terms of evolution and we feel that something should be precursor to the existing thing. And this concept comes from the Western philosophy and Western ideology wherein there should be always one precursor and from there this evolves. So this is a linear evolution kind of theory that we talk about, but it necessarily be not that way. Why? Because when it comes to Indian temples, especially when you look at Vedic period, in Vedic period you definitely do not find temples, but that doesn't mean that there was no worship of gods. There was worship of gods. We used to offer. There were a lot of rituals, but then what was used to offer prayers to the gods was Vedis, the Yajna Vedis. So with the Vedi, and there are good shastras written about it. For example, there is this book called Shatavata Brahmana, the ancient text. It talks in detail about how a Yajna Vedi has to be built. So the directions, the vastu, the number of bricks, the size of the bricks that are used in making a Yajna Vedi. So all these are discussed in detail. So if you understand what is Yajna Vedi, then we understand the whole concept of temple. So Yajna Vedi is made of mud, a terracotta. So that is a component of earth. And then in Yajnavedi, we have Agni, fire. And the fire is the component of sun. So the component of sun and earth is Yajnavedi. And then we have a lot of rituals to perform in Yajnavedi. And then we talk about the Virat Purush because in Rig Veda there is a suktam called Purusha Suktam which talks about Virata Purush from whose body everything has evolved. So the fire in Yajnavedi is considered as Virat Purush. So slowly that Virata Purush became the Murti in the temple. And based on that Murti, whatever the elements are there in that Murti, for example, there are feet, there is hip, and then you have shoulders, you have neck, you have head. So adding the same elements to the building, we have built the temple. So in the temple also you have the Pada, and then you have Janga, Kati, the hip, and then you have Skanda, and then you have Griva, the neck, and then you have Amalaka, which is the head. So whatever the parts are there in the body of a Murti, the same parts are replicated in the temple. It was initially the Yajnavedi, and Yajnavedi slowly from there evolved a kind of worship called as Chaitya Vrikshas. So Chaitya Vrikshas were also there. Then after that, the Virata Purush, and from the Purush, okay, resembling him, the body, then a temple was. Otherwise, you see, there is no reason why we should name the parts of a temple based on the parts of a human body because we consider ourselves as the god. So Ham Brahmosmi. And since I am the god, God is within me. So the temple is a representation of the human body. And who is that human body? The Virat Purush that we talk about in Rig Veda or in the evolution of this universe, etc. But where do we go wrong is here we are trying to explore something that was not there during Vedic times, that is temple. It was there, but it was in another form. And to give best example, I'll tell you, everybody is familiar with Chanakya and Chanakya's Ardhashastra. So in Chanakya's Ardhashastra, there are more than 12 books in Ardhashastra, and one of the earliest translations or books written is by Shama Shastri, the person who has discovered Ardhashastra. And then in third book, which is related to law, there is a chapter, a sixth chapter, and that chapter is all about building. So there he uses a word to a building, a religious building, which is called as Agnisthanam, wherein he mentions Agnisthanam maybe most probably like a Yajnavedi where there is fire altar, and over that fire altar there was some shelter constructed. So for example, if you take temple today, it is same. You have a murti and you have a shelter, but then because we have more resources, more money, more manpower, we have, and then more creativity and artisticness, and that is the reason we have evolved. That is the only reason. So the same Agnisthanam that was mentioned by Chanakya in Arthashastra later on developed into Devasthanam. That is the only difference.
Okay, and you mentioned about Vriksha something, right? Vriksha?
Yeah, Vriksha Chaitya.
Yeah, what is the specificity of that structure? Like, what
So
exactly was that?
basically, let me connect it to 2 3 points. We generally, in terms of Indian culture or Indian heritage, especially in terms of evolution of Indian architecture or temple architecture, people believe that Buddhist structures have helped, or the temples have evolved from the Buddhist structures like stupa, etc. But then the reality is the stupa itself has evolved from a pre-existing structure called Chaitya Vriksha. And this Chaitya Vriksha is also called as Kalpadruma. Kalpadruma is the Kalpa Vriksha. So Chaitya, so in olden days, it was a practice in the society wherein the trees were worshipped, and because of their sanctity, there used to be a kind of railing around the tree. So you find such examples, especially a kind of archaeological evidences on the walls, a kind of, let us say, Buddhist monuments, wherein there is a railing and there is a tree in that, and people are worshipping the tree. And that custom predates Buddha. And from there evolves this practice of stupa. And there is also misconception that stupas are Buddhist, but no, it is not, because there are also Jain stupas in India. There is this British officer whose name is Vincent A. Smith. He has done a beautiful research and written a book called as The Jain Stupa and Other Antiquities of Mathura. So he has discovered a Jain Stupa in Mathura, and he said there were stupas for Jains also. Now, why are people more concerned about establishing the fact that the Hindu temples have evolved from the stupas? Because they wanted to predate, or they wanted to say everything has evolved from Buddhism. That same British colonial theory they wanted to take forward. But when you look at this, such works like the Jaina Stupa, etc., it clearly says that stupa is not a Buddhist concept, first of all, and then the temples have not evolved from the Buddhist structures, and the Vriksha Chaitya, which was predating the Buddha, the worship of the trees, etc., was already there, from where this concept comes from. So this all proves that the temples in different form existed, like Chaitya Vrikshas, Kalpadrumas, okay, etc., existed even before the Buddha, and then later on they have been modified and copied onto next elements, like the same Kalpavruksha or the Vriksha Chaitya became a mound. And so the same mound, a kind of a structure, egg-like structure, okay, wherein the monks and their the things that they have used were buried in that, and then they were worshipped. And later on, the same structures have developed into different other structures the following years. Maybe these all happened post-Mauryan era.
Okay, and then post the Mauryan era, after the interaction of Hinduism and Buddhism, how does it move towards the Gupta era and further to the medieval and then the British period? What changes happen there?
So I was saying about how temples were not actually looked like what temples are today. They were like Yajnavedis, and then pre-Buddhistic Buddhist period before Buddha, the worship was in the form of Chaitya Vrikshas and Kalpadrumas, and you have enough evidence, especially in Vishnu Puran, where the mention of Kalpadruma is there, and even it is also mentioned in Mahabharata, where there is Pralaya. So they mention that the Kalpadrumas, the holy trees, are falling due to thunders and Pralaya that is happening. So there are evidences. And then post Buddha, what happens is the same practice of Chaitya Vriksha and Kalpadruma translates into the Chaityas, wherein the same element is carved on the stone or made of bricks, etc. And then slowly, later on, what has happened is by the time we reach Guptas, so we could see a beautiful temples of the bricks, stone, etc. But then what happens is in these times also there were temples, maybe not as grand as that have happened during the 7th century, 6th century, or 10th century, like that. But then there were temples. And for example, in Matsya Puran, and then in a text like Agni Puran, and then Samarangana Sutradhara, then Aparajita Pritcha also. In this ancient text, they have clearly mentioned that the temples were not just built of terracotta and stone and wood, but then they were also built of cloth. So they mention about makeshift temples. In a sense, whenever the festival comes, they used to build a huge temple with the help of the sticks and cloth, and they used to complete the celebration, and they used to remove that. Or else they have built the temples using the cloth, a kind of a tent kind of, they used to worship If it is gone. Again, they used to rebuild it. So the temples built of wood, the temples built of sun-dried bricks, the temples built of baked bricks. Stone was not much predominantly used as it is used during the 10th century, but then less. The terracotta baked, sun-baked bricks were used predominantly, and wood was used. And that is the reason almost for that 600, 700 years of period, from the times of Buddha till the arrival of the Guptas. So you do not find many structures, temple structures. Why? Because perishable material was used, and that is the reason we could not find. But then, yes, we have evidences, numismatic evidence. For example, I'll give you one good example. So Alexander Cunningham, he has written a book, Coins of Ancient India. So in his book, Coins of Ancient India, he talks about Audumbara coins. Who are these Audumbaras? They were the rulers of the present Punjab region. So the Punjab, in the sense, I talk about the Punjab of India and the Pakistan also. These people have used the coins, and they are the punchmarked coins, wherein there are temples, and these temples have shikaras, and they are built on the banks of a river, and there is a trishul standing beside the temple. That is a coin of Audumbaras, and this belongs to 2nd century BCE, in a sense somewhere around Buddha or after Buddha. And since by looking at that coins, you clearly understand that temples were built with proper pillars, superstructure, shikara, and all that elements. And today we call temples as Tirtha Kshetras. Tirtha Kshetras in the sense that are built on the banks of a Tirtha. Tirtha means the river, the flowing water body. And the coins of Audumbaras are the best evidence to prove that temples existed, okay, during those days. The only one thing, maybe perishable material was used and they are no more existing, or maybe durable material was used, but then we have not excavated it till now. There is another reason, that even today, most of the cities that were famous during pre-Mauryas and post-Mauryas are living cities even today. And especially the cities like Kashi, city like Mathura, cities like Indraprastha, so they are populated. Maybe there must be many evidences that are lying below the grounds of these below the layers of these cities, and we have not excavated, and we may probably we have not found them. Maybe we will never find them. That is the reason.
So, Ramakrishna, if you could start with the Himalayan temple in Karakuni.
In the Himalayan region, Hadimba can be taken as one good example. So, why it can be taken as one classic example of the Himalayan temples is, I said you, the Himalayan temples are Katkoni temples. So, the combination of the stone and the wood are used in the construction. And another peculiar style of these temples is basically their roof, the superstructure. The superstructure of these Himalayan temples are in pagoda style or pyramid style. Why are they so? Because these are the areas which see heavy rainfall and also the snowfall. So if their roofs are like the other temple, there are chances of seepage into the structure. So to avoid the seepage, their superstructures are called as the pyramidal structures of pagoda basically. So almost all the temples, right from the Srinagar temples, the wooden temples to the Hidimba temple of Manali, they're all the pagoda style of temples or pagoda structures. And when you look at this Hidimba temple, basically Hidimba is a character from Mahabharata. Pandavas go through there, and then they come across the Hidimba. Then there will be a brother of Hidimba who will be killed by the Bhima. Then Hidimba is married. Then they will have a son, Gatotkacha. So this is the story that goes on. So here, when you look at this temple, all the elements that are there in normal other temple, like Navagrahas, such kind of elements are carved on the wood. And moreover, this is a Hidimba temple, a Devi temple. So there are also some sacrificial rituals that are there. So after sacrifices are done, the horns of the sacrificial animals are tied to the temple. So that is also there. So when you get into the temple, you have a Garbhagriha wherein you have a stone structure, which is basically one of the stone of the mountain ranges that are there. On that is the temple built, and then on that small stone there is the murti of the Devi, so which is for the people to worship. So that is Hidimba. So why I say Hidimba temple is because it is almost the classical example for all the temples that are there in the Himalayas, especially the Himachal and the lower Shivaliks of the Himalayas.
Okay. And what about the world famous iconic Khajuraho temples?
Khajuraho temples, I've been to Khajuraho temples almost whenever I get time because it is just 350 kilometers, 300 350 kilometers from here. So I happen to go there, and you will not believe it takes at least eight, not less than 8 hours to photograph one temple, one single temple. In the sense, if you really want to photograph all the temples, it will take not less than 1 month, especially if you want to document. So the Khajuraho temples are built by the Chandela rulers, and then these Chandela rulers have built more than 80 temples there in Khajuraho, and then today only 20 to 25 temples are left. So 20 to 25 temples are intact, and of the 20 to 25 temples, the famous example of Nagara style of temples in India is the Kandarya Mahadev temple. So Kandarya Mahadev temple is one of the most beautiful and still intact temple. You want to understand and study the Nagara style of temple and its elements, then you should visit the Khajuraho. And the beauty of these Khajuraho temples is like they do not have any enclosed walls. So there is no prakaram for this wall. So what is the benefit of not having prakarams or the compound walls around the temple is from wherever, like whichever place you are looking at the temples, they are very clearly visible. No element of the temple is hidden. So you can have darshan of the temple even from the long distance. So that is what is the temple for? Temple is to fill yourself with the spirituality and remember the God, and that is fulfilled even from the long distances. And another important speciality of these Khajuraho temples are they are also the tantric temples where tantrism was much practiced. Especially instead of calling it as tantric, you have to be very specific. You can call them as Kaulachara temples. So there are many Kaulacharyas or monks who were practicing the Kaulachara, the tantric form of Shaivism in this region. And that is the reason the practices that these people used to go through or the rituals that these people used to go through, you see all of them on the temple walls, especially the erotic sculptures. Erotic sculptures comes from that Kaulachara tradition only. And it is said that each and every sculpture of Kaulachara temples, there will be a mandala drawn, and on that mandala, the murtis are placed. And such placing of the murtis on the mandala will give a special energy and power to the temple. And it is not that easy for us to understand the mandalas that are drawn by the Kaulacharas for their practice. And one of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, no doubt. And if somebody have to understand the temples, especially the greatness of Indian temples, then they must visit the Western group of Khajuraho temples. So there are two groups now which are very famous: the Eastern group and the Western group. So the Kandarya Mahadev temple, the famous temple that I have been quoting, is from the Western group of temples. So there is also another temple which is very famous called as Lakshmana temple that was built by Lakshavarman. So by looking at the temple name Lakshmana temple, we should not mistake it to be the a temple dedicated to the Lakshmana, but rather it is the temple dedicated to Vishnu. And the murti that is there in this temple is one of the special murtis in India. Why? Because the murti is called as Vaikunta Murti. And this Vaikunta Murti is not from the central India. Why? Because I'm talking about the Khajuraho, which is in central India, the Madhya Pradesh. This comes from the tradition of Kashmir. So the worship of Vaikunta Murti or Vaikuntha Vishnu used to happen in Kashmir region. But in due course of time during the history, in the past, it has traveled and at last they have brought it to the Khajuraho and it is there in the Lakshmana temple. One of the most intricate, beautiful and rare murtis in the country.
Okay, moving slightly towards Western India, what about the Ajanta Ellora? Because that is one of the most historical and heritage monuments, right? And a very important part of Buddhism as well. So,
Buddhism, Jainism, and also Hinduism. So all the three aspects you find there. One of the earliest, like because this is the area, even the Karnataka, Maharashtra, okay, and till Gujarat. This belt, you see one of the earliest cave temples. For example, if you go to Karnataka, you find Chalukyan cave temples, and then towards the north of Karnataka, then you have Maharashtra, then cave temples. During the time of Vakatakas, and what these people have done is they have patronized Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism. In Ajanta, when you see Buddhist caves, and then in Ellora, you find Okay, Buddhist also, Jain also, and Hindu also. In Ellora caves, cave number 16 is the very important for everybody. Why? Because that is the temple of Kailashanada. And what is the specialty of Kailashanada is it is a monolithic temple and one of the largest monolithic temples in the world. And building such large monolithic temple on a hillock, because in those days we do not have any radar technology or anything to find out how huge the stone is or how deep the stone is, how strong the stone is. Like I said, whether if it is Kum Shila or what kind of Shila it is, we do not know whether it is suitable for carving the temple and all. But still, our ancestors they must have done lot of homework. It is not included basically. Lot of details like measurements, okay, types of temples. For example, you go to Samarangana Sutradhara, there are more than 45 kinds of temples mentioned. 45 to 60 types of temples are there. So different types of temples, they have different names, etc. But today we have only 3 4 types of temples that we are familiar with. Such detailed literature is written or detailed explanation is written about our temples, but then there is nothing related to the construction of the temples, like what kind of tools they used to use, what kind of like hammers and the chisels they used to use, etc. You will find them, no doubt. If you go to any Stapati's home, you will find what kind of chisels and hammers were used, but still they are not explained much in detail. Why? One reason why they have not explained much was this was a common practice in the society. For example, let us say if you ask me about agriculture, so agriculture is something that you do and you learn it. So length and breadth about the explanation of agriculture is not. For example, let us say, how do you supply water to your field? It is not explained in any book because that is to be understood. It is natural. So if you have water, you have to just make the canal and supply the water to the field. Likewise, our ancestors, they were very familiar with the construction of temples or the science involved in it, like how do you sculpt, what kind of instrument you use. So these were all common in the society. So our ancestors never felt that it is very important to note down them in the text. So they have not recorded anywhere.
But one thing I want to ask you, what is the specific significance of these cave temples in Western India? Because you mentioned that a lot of cave temples are there in Gujarat, Maharashtra, even Karnataka. How are they different from other temple structures?
So basically, again, the geography comes in here. So why? Because you have two Ghats in South India, one the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats. You do not find many cave temples on this eastern part of the South India, but then on Western Ghats you have a lot of cave temples because Western Ghats are higher and they are from the ground level. There are good number of hillocks that are there, and this is the region. The traveling of Buddhism and Jainism to the South India, the track for the spread of Jainism and Buddhism towards South India happened, especially Jainism. Buddhism came from the eastern track also, but then the Jainism came through this. There are also places like Nagarjunakonda, etc., wherein Jainism was thriving. So, in those days, what used to happen is there was this concept of Chaturmasa. And what is this Chaturmasa is soon after the summers, we will have 4 months of rainy season. During these 4 months, the Hindus, Jain, and Buddhist monks they used to take rest. They used to settle at one place and they used to do a kind of prayers, chantings, etc. So whenever they have come across these regions, whenever they found hillocks, because the construction of structural temples is little difficult. Why? Because you have to lay the foundation, you have to bring the materials, you have to transport, you have to join one by one, and then we have to build scaffolding, and then you have to lift the stones. It takes a lot of labor, but when there are already the hillocks available, to remove the stone is very easy compared to building the structure temple. And that is the reason all most of the earliest cave temples are monolithic temples. For example, Mahabalipuram monolithic temple, the stones were there, people have gone there and they have chiseled the stones. That is easy instead of searching, going in search of the rocks and finding them, bringing them, transporting them. So the cave, whenever there was rainy season, they needed a shelter for 4 months during the rainy season, so that they can sit and they can practice the spirituality. And in these places what they have done is they have dug the hillocks and they have created the caves, and they used to sit there and they used to meditate and they used to do their rituals. The reason why structural temples were not earlier but then later, because of this reason, it was easy for them to make cave temples.
Got it. And moving from there towards Karnataka, what's the significance of the temples in Hampi and Pattadakal, that area? Like, it's considered one of the most iconic set of temples, right? So,
Iconic, yes. See, these two places, Hampi and Pattadakal. See, Pattadakal is one of the earliest magnificent temple complex of the Chalukyas they have built. And in two lines, if I want to say about Pattadakal, Pattadakal is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, no doubt. And why did they give UNESCO World Heritage status to this complex? Is because this is only one temple complex in the world wherein you find the Nagara style of temples also and Dravidian style of temples also. They constructed both styles of temples in the same complex. That is one reason. When you go to Pattadakal temple complex, you can see both. You have Virupaksha temple. So Virupaksha temple built in Dravidian style of temples. There are some other minor temples in the same complex which are built in Nagara style of temples. When it comes to Hampi, because Hampi itself is established between the hillocks and rocks, lot of granite is available in and around. So they have used granite predominantly for different construction, for the market yards, the Kalyana Mandabas, for the temples, etc. But then one unique thing that you find in Hampi is the superstructures. To one level, they have constructed using granite, no doubt. But after that, the superstructure, the upper levels of the temples, they have used brick and mortar. So now, why did they use brick and mortar? Because you see, let us say the golden chariot of Hampi, if you see. So today you see only the half of the golden chariot. So not the full golden chariot is available. Why? Because till where the granite was used, it is intact. But above that, they have used brick and mortar. So because of the use of brick and mortar, okay, that is gone. It is no more. So maybe it is perishable material. That is the reason. But then why did they use brick and mortar to the upper structures of the Hampi temples? Is because they felt that the superstructures built in brick and mortar will not give much weight to the base. That is one reason. And another important reason is it was easy for them to transport the brick and mortar to that height. Otherwise, transporting or lifting granite to that heights is very difficult. So, if you look at the Gopuram of Virupaksha temple that is in Hampi, okay, down the Hemakuta hill, it's magnificently huge, unbelievable. And imagine lifting the granite to the last level of that Gopuram is highly, highly difficult. So, it was easy for them to lift brick and mortar. So, they have used brick in the upper structures, upper levels of the Gopuram, Vimana, or Mandapa, etc. And they have decorated. And then over that brick layers, they have used the mortar and stucco. During this Vijayanagara times, or especially the Hampi, the use of mortar and stucco to bring that intricate details of the murtis or the sculpture was in its zenith. And since before that, there are no instances wherein this brick, mortar, and stucco has been used in this artistic and intricate manner. And this is the place where they have done it.
okay, and I want to ask you one thing because you mentioned there is an overlapping of the Dravidian and the Nagara style of architecture, right? So, is there any structure which has both in Hampi? How does that, like, is there a meshing of the two styles happening in some specific of both those styles, or is it that they are separate structures but in the same area? How is it like?
The separate structure, same area you find in Patadakal temple complex. So you have a separate Nagara temples and you have separate the
Are there any
Dravida
examples of
temples.
fusion
But
of the
then
two styles?
yes. There are examples. Some elements of Dravidian temples and some elements of Nagara temples are taken and they are brought together built, and all these temples are called as Visara temples. So Visara is again a word that is to be debatable because there are elements of Nagara temple and Dravida temple, so it is a combination. So the mule, so mule is a combination of two animals. Like they say, the Visara style of temple architecture is also the combination of Nagara and Dravida, and that is the reason it is called Visara. So Visara means mule in Sanskrit. But then again, many scholars do not agree with it. Why? Because now if it is horse and donkey, so Nagara and Dravida, which is horse and which is donkey? So now it is somewhere demeaning. So now what does the scholar say? It is not that way. Now I will take another example of temples from Karnataka, Hoysala temples. So Hoysala temples are beautiful, intricate temples, and till today they are not UNESCO World Heritage Site, and that is the surprise. But then I don't think there are at any temples or temple complex in India as beautiful as the Hoysala temple. They are magnificent, intricate. Imagine the jewelry that is carved on the murtis of the temple move, and they are so intricate and minute. You cannot replicate that jewelry on the metal now. Even you cannot do it on silver and gold. That intricate the art is in these Hoysala temples. So these Hoysala temples, what they used to do is they used to have multiple garbhagrihas. Multiple garbhagrihas in the sense you have, let us say, Shiva. Then along with Shiva, you have the Parvati and you have Ganesha or Subramanya, let us. So if it is one Garbhagriha, you have one Mandapa. And if it is multiple Garbhagrihas, you have to have multiple Mandapas. And that is the reason what happens, if you remember the Belur temple of, or the Channakeshava temple of Beluru, its Mandapa is almost very large. So from east to west horizontal, and then you have a small entrance. In a sense, it is very spacious, Vishra or Vishal. So from that Vishra comes Visara. In a sense, the temples whose mandapas are very spacious, and the temples that have used the elements from Nagara and Dravida, such temples are called as Vishra temples. And where they have used this technique is the temples of the Hoysalas and the temples built by Vakatakas. So these temples have used the combination of the fusion of both.
So basically, the Deccan Plateau, which is like the place where the north and
South
south.
meet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In real sense, if you see where were Visara temples, the Visara temples should be somewhere in Telangana and Andhra region, in this region. But then maybe they do not remain today. We do not have much evidences, but then the evidences of Visara temples are very much there in Karnataka region today.
Moving to eastern India, what about the Konark Sun Temple?
So, Konark Sun Temple. One important fact before that, I would like to say there is this myth among Indians that whenever we say Konark Sun Temple or whenever we talk about temple, they say there are only few sun temples in India, and they say they count Konark, then Martand Sun Temple, Multan, and then a few they count, but that is not true. There are many sun temples in India. So, as many temples as we have to Shiva, Vishnu, we also have for the Surya. So Ranakpur, for example, in Ranakpur you have a beautiful sun temple. Ranakpur is a Jain Tirtha Kshetra, but then there you have a beautiful sun temple. If there is Katarmal in Uttarakhand, there you have a sun temple. So anyways, Multan you have a sun temple. Okay, and then likewise there are many sun temples and there is no end to their list. Okay, that is one myth. And another myth also is there wherein people believe that there is only one Brahma temple in India that is near Ajmer, Pushkar. There are many Brahma temples in India. For example, very near to that, if it is Rajasthan, in Gujarat only, there is a place called Khed Brahma. So in Khed Brahma itself, we have a beautiful Brahma temple. And one of and much as good as and as beautiful, or in terms of architecture, it is much beautiful than what is there in Pushkar.
Oh,
Ah, yes, very beautiful temple. The only one thing is that localites have painted it in plastic color. Otherwise, excellent temple and excellent place also, Khed Brahma. So these things, what happens is maybe we do not travel much and we do not come across all these types of temples. We are in a wrong notion that Brahma temples and this, okay, these sun temples are very less in number. Now, coming to our main discussion of the Konark Sun Temple. The Konark Sun Temple is built by the Ganga rulers, especially the Narasimha. And the reason that it is built in this region because one of the corners of the country, and that is where they are built. And this temple guided the ships coming to the east coast. It was used as one of the guiding elements for the ships to reach the coast. And then this temple is also one of the best examples of the Kalinga style of architecture because the Kalinga region. And what we see today, this Konark Sun Temple is only some 50% of the temple because rest of the 50% of the temple is lost. So basically in Kalinga temples, we have Mandapa. So the Mandapa of the temple is called as Jagamohan. And what we see today, the humongous structure of Konark Sun Temple is the Mandapa actually. Konark Temple is built on the style of a chariot. When you look at Konark Temple, it has 12 wheels and then there are 7 horses that are dragging the chariot. So whole structure looks like a chariot, wherein chariot basically the representation of God Surya always is in the form of a person who is sitting on a chariot and riding the horses. Basically, there are seven horses. Seven horses represent the 7 meters of Sanskrit grammar, and they also represent the spectrum of sunlight: violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. Then the 12 wheels indicate the 12 months of the year. So this is a great learning, kind of, you can say. It's a school or university for people to understand the calendar, the time calculation in those days. And there also used to be one pillar here. It is removed from there. It is no more there. And that pillar was called as Arunastamba. And what this Arunastamba used to do is, based on the movement of the sun, the shadow of the Stamba used to give time calculations for the students who are studying in the Gurukula and other temple activities. But now the Arunastamba from here is removed, and it is shifted, and it is there in front of the Puri temple. So later on, so now the Stamba that you see before the temple of Puri is the same Arunastamba once upon a time was there before the Sun Temple, Konark. So one of the most beautiful temples in India, one of the intricate temples in India. And the surprising element I was saying was, the temple that you see today is only the 50% temple. The rest of the 50% is lost. In the sense, only the Mandapa portion is visible, and the main Shikara portion, the Garbhagriha and Shikara, is lost. Just Mandapa itself is so huge and magnificent. Imagine the Sun Temple, Konark, in its fullest form. So I digitally have recreated the structure. I have drawn, and it's magnificent and wonderful. So if it was intact, it would have been one of the largest temples like Tanjore Brihadeshwara temples in the country.
Okay, I think that is the sad part, like the loss of these heritage sites. I think that is like the sad part, whether it is through any form of defacement or any natural calamity, that because then that part of our history is kind of lost to us. But moving ahead, I think you mentioned the Brihadishwara temple at Tanjore, the Chola kings, their magnum opus was this temple. So I have been to that temple, and I was quite fascinated as a kid that it did not cast a shadow at any time, and I went during the afternoon time, like the peak sunlight, and it did not cast its shadow. So I mean, I found that quite interesting. So tell me more about it.
But sorry to say this. They say that this is the temple that do not cast its a shadow, but then it definitely does. So this is one myth that is there among the people, that it does not cast shadow. It does in the mornings. Only during the noon times, okay, you do not find maybe it's a shadow, because you have a very vast mandapa, etc. But even then, there are many instances wherein I clicked a photograph somewhere around 3 o'clock in the evening, and I have a shadow in my photos. One time I visited the temple early in the morning, and yes, there also we can see the shadow. Anyways, one of the grandest temples of the Cholas, built by the great Rajaraja Chola, one of the first imperial kings of the Chola dynasty. And then I'll tell you one small story here. Like, there are two temples. One is the Gangaikonda Cholapuram Brihadishwara temple, and Tanjavuru Brihadishwara temple. There are two temples, and these two temples are massive. And one was built. The first one was built by the Rajaraja Chola, and the second one at Gangaikonda Cholapuram was built by Rajendra Chola, the son of Rajaraja Chola. He has built the temple almost reaching 190 feet height. And then when Rajendra Chola, his son, started Gangaikonda Cholapuram Brihadishwara temple construction, when the base, Garbhagriha, etc. was built, and when they have come to the Shikara portion and they started constructing, they realized, in this proportional manner, if a temple is being built, then it will reach more height than the Tanjavuru Brihadishwara temple. And that is the reason what Rajendra Chola has done is, if I am building a temple higher than the Tanjavuru Brihadishwara temple, it will be kind of disrespect to my father. My father should always be great. And that is the reason what did Rajendra Chola do is, Rajendra Chola purposefully has reduced the number of tires in the Shikara or the Vimana of Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple. And that is how you see the Vimanam or the line of the Brihadishwara Vimanam straight, but then the linear line of the Gangaikonda Cholapuram is in a curved manner. That is one kind of beautiful dedication from son Rajendra Chola to father Rajaraja Chola. So that is one thing. And obviously the whole temple is constructed in granite, the both temples. So one of the hardest rock in the world. And the most beautiful element of this temple is the Nataraja, who is there in this temple. Towards the north direction of the temple, you can see Nataraja. And there's a beautiful smile Mandahasam we call it, in the face of that Nataraja. And bringing that Mandahasam, the beauty smile on the temple granite stone is very, very difficult. And our ancestors have carved that smile on the granite stone on the face of Nataraja is once in lifetime experience which we can have.
Absolutely. Well, moving from the temples, I wanted to ask you, because you work with the Ministry of Tourism, you teach tourism professionally to students. In your training programs, what kind of training programs do you offer to people who want to become guides, tour guides, and who want to take people through these places? Because a lot of these historical heritage places have tour guides, right? And the idea here is that it enhances the travel experience, especially for the person who is conscious about heritage places and and very important places, temple towns and all of that. So, and what kind of challenges do you face as a trainer to train these guides? What issues do you face? Is there any use of technology? There is this menace of unauthorized tour guides as well. A lot of people, lot of places, especially in remote areas, you will not necessarily find authorized tour guides. So that also can reduce the experience for people who are visiting those places. So is there any initiatives being taken to reduce that and to train more people so that you can have a proper historical context laden experience when you go to these important sites?
You have asked so many questions and much in one or two lines. Let me tell you this way. India is one of the top five countries in the world which has got highest number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So maybe we will always come at that fifth position or sixth position. So we have 40 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and the country with highest number of World Heritage Sites are somewhere around 50, 55, something like that. All the five hill forts of Rajasthan are clubbed together and called as one UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, in a sense, if five of them are recognized individually, then we have 45. Like what do you say, mountain railways of India, they are also clubbed together and called as the mountain railways of India. And then they are also like three, four clubbed together and called as one. And there are many famous places, like I said, the Hoysala temples are yet to be recognized. And there are many beautiful temples in Tamil Nadu alone, which are still the practicing temples, are under the control of the respective communities, but not under ASI or any other. For example, Madurai Meenakshi Temple, Padmanabha Swami Temple of Tirunanthapuram, all such beautiful temples, they are not under any of this thing, but still. So imagine all such are considered individually and separately and brought to the number, it will reach easily 100, 150. And there will not be any country in this world who can even come closer to 50% of what we are. And that is magnanimity of what the heritage we have in India. But still, the problem is we do not have proper manpower to interpret these heritage or heritage buildings to the people. Like many foreigners are visiting, many Indians are the domestic tourists are coming. And what happens is, let us say, I will give you a very good example. You go to Khajuraho, take people to Kandari Mahadev temple, there is a guide. So if he is properly trained, it is. Otherwise, basically what happens is you take people to that place and you start talking about history. So but then before you, there is a beautiful temple and many elements are visible. Talk about those visible elements, and that is what is presently lacking in India. Interpretation of the visible elements of heritage is one of the important aspect that we have to focus on. So keeping this in mind, what did government of India do is, Ministry of Tourism, government of India, the central government, they used to have a program called as RLG, regional level guide. So they have divided India into regions: Central India, South India, and North India, East India, West India, etc. So into four regions they have divided, and they used to train. They used to conduct the entrance examination. All the bachelors qualified, bachelors students, they used to take, qualify the examination, train them for 6 months, and they used to give the license. That is how it used to happen. And then there are also state governments. So state tourism boards, they used to consult IITTM. IITTM in the sense Indian Institute of Tourism Travel Management, which is under the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, an autonomous body. So they used to consult us. We used to provide training to their selected candidates. So selection and everything used to be done by the respective state tourism boards, and we used to do them. We used to give them training. So what kind of training we used to give them. We go there, we stay there for 10-15 days, and then we take them on the field and find out what are the heritage, what are the monuments that are there in the locality. We used to take them and we used to explain them and tell them to explain it again and conduct the tours by themselves. And that is how it used to be, always a field study. So we used to believe that through field study, what we can do is we can train them better instead of sitting in the class and letting them explain the concepts. So, like regional level guides. Now, what has happened? So, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, like you said, there is menace of many non-qualified guides who come in between. They touts. They are in the back of us, troubling us. They'll be saying, "For give me 100 rupees, I'll do this. Give me 200 rupees or 50 rupees. I'll be taking you for 4 monuments, 5 monuments." All this kind of things they do. So to avoid this, Ministry of Tourism Government of India has come up with an online tour guiding program, which is called as Incredible India Tourist Facilitator Certification Program. It is called as IITFC. So everybody from plus two onwards can register online and can do an online course for 6 months, and we will train them online for 1 week. So 1 week orientation will be there. So we are giving them. So this course is a basic course. The people who are doing this IITFC are not eligible to enter into archaeological monuments, but then they can do any tourism related work outside. And there is one another course to be launched, which is called as Advanced Course of IITFC. So who are doing IITFC, maybe they will be provided some entry to the monuments. It is still discussed and debated. So like that. So through this online IITFC program, so we are trying to create as much manpower as possible so that these monuments or heritage spots across the country will have some interpreters, so that something should be said about these temples, structures, heritage structures, and they do not go with the people who are visiting these structures do not go back with lot of questions unanswered. So that is how government of India and plus we ministry IITTM are doing a lot of efforts to train the people. And what IITTM also does is in the summers we conduct 10 days, 15 days short term courses on heritage and iconography. So who are the participants who come to these courses are all the existing tour guides, either they are IITFC guides or the state level guides or monument level guides or regional level guides. They come, they enhance their knowledge. And other than that, we also conduct from the government side, we also conduct refresher courses. So you understand what is refresher. So just a kind of revision and just a kind of updation of the knowledge or the market techniques. What are the new trends that are there in the market, etc. They are updated and they are given new knowledge and they are again put into the market. So such kind of efforts we are doing a lot to train the people.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are some really good initiatives. With that, Ramakrishna, we come to the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for giving your time and taking us through in such detail.
Thank you for calling me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, when we get another interesting guest on the Indic Underground, always remember Dharma rocks. Thank you.